So let's take a closer look at these corruption charges then. In case 1000, Netanyahu and his wife are accused of accepting gifts worth more than $190,000 from two wealthy businessmen in return for political favours. In case 2000, Netanyahu is accused of making a deal with an Israeli newspaper for favourable coverage in exchange for legislation to weaken its competitor. Case 4000 involves allegations that Netanyahu gave regulatory favours to Israel's largest telecom company in return for positive coverage. The benefits included mergers and financial gains. The trial, which began in 2020, has been delayed repeatedly. This week's hearings were cancelled, with critics accusing Netanyahu of stalling. Well, joining us now is Marwan Bishara, he's Al Jazeera senior political analyst. Always good to see you, Marwan. So Donald Trump has called for the domestic corruption case against Netanyahu to be dropped several times since the Gaza peace plan was adopted in the Knesset in October, and then a formal pardon request in November. And now this request by Netanyahu himself. I wonder, Marwan, whether this was always part of the Gaza deal arrangement between Trump and Netanyahu. So maximum pressure on securing a domestic pardon for Netanyahu in return for Netanyahu acquiescing to Trump's plan. Am I reading too much into this, Marwan?
Well, perhaps a little bit too much, in the sense that Trump saved Netanyahu from Netanyahu by suggesting the ceasefire, because Netanyahu was stuck in the genocidal war in Gaza. There was nothing more to bomb. He wasn't able to achieve any of Israel's objectives. He was stuck as Israel's economy was collapsing, its reputations around the world was in tatters, and its society was in deep desperation. So, if anything, Trump helped Netanyahu thus far. But that does not mean there was no complicity between the two men. Clearly, it was Netanyahu who asked Trump to intervene. Trump did that, and now Netanyahu has to carry his end of the bargain by asking for that very particular pardon, because otherwise the president of Israel couldn't issue it. So there is a complicity going on here, and clearly Trump has stood up for some of his buddies, whether it was the Brazilian former President Bolsonaro, whether it's the Argentinian President Milei, even the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I mean, he really tried to intervene on a number of occasions to help some of his personal allies around the world, and Netanyahu is certainly one of those. Now, as we heard in the report, for Netanyahu's detractors in Israel, this is really terrible news. They are furious. But I think for Israel's detractors around the world, this is not really a bad news, because Netanyahu is an utter liability for Israel. He's an international fugitive. He's an outlaw. As long as he stays in power, Israel will never be able to go past this war.
I wonder, you mentioned liability for Israel. I wonder whether or not this will blow up in Donald Trump's face. I mean, he said, cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that? Donald Trump's words when addressing the Knesset in October before asking the Israeli president directly to pardon Netanyahu. I mean, unconditional support for Israel, Marwan, has long been on the job description for American Republican politicians. But there have been cracks in the MAGA movement, haven't they, who are openly critical of Israel's war in Gaza. Do you think the MAGA lot will forgive Trump for this?
Well, clearly, there is a schism in the American right, in the American society in general. Clearly, America is split on the question of its unconditional support for Israel. And yes, that split is increasing on the right. But I'm not sure Trump cares very much, because he's not running again for presidents, all right? At least not for now. So as far as he's concerned, it's all about accumulation of power and increasing his leverage around the world. The more he can increase his leverage in the Middle East, the better it is. At this point in time, let's say he owns Netanyahu's 60-70%. With this pardon, he owns Netanyahu 100%. He dominates Netanyahu. He can basically do anything he wants to do with Netanyahu if such a thing happens and Netanyahu stays in power. So for the American president, who always wants to be the alpha male, if you will, he always wants to show to be the boss, in as far as the relationship with Israel, this is not going to be a case whereby Netanyahu swings Biden about as he wishes, this is going to be a case where he is subjected to Trump's mood swings, if you will.
Just a thought, Marwan. What about the cases against Netanyahu internationally at the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Courts in The Hague? What message would a domestic pardon send regarding those cases?
But well, this is the thing, right? I mean, Israel has been boasting for so many decades to be the one and only democracy in the Middle East, right? It is a kind of a procedural democracy for Jews in Israel, yes. And that has been diminishing slowly but surely under Netanyahu. Right before the war, if you remember, before October 23, Netanyahu was on a crusade, a jihad, whatever let's call it, in a way that to diminish Israel's legal system, to undermine Israel's Supreme Court, to basically break up Israel's institutions, to even diminish the role of the Attorney General, and so on and so forth. So he has an issue with legality and institutions and liberal democracy, there's no doubt. And he's been trying to diminish that. Internationally, of course, in addition to all of that, he's now been indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. He led Israel to a genocidal war that's now Israel is indicted for genocide, basically, by the International Court of Justice. So the man is an outlaw. He's an international fugitive. That's why when he flies, for example, to the United States, he has to avoid a good number of airspaces, because wherever there's jurisdiction for the ICJ or the ICC, he has a problem. That's why I said for his detractors, it's a problem. They are furious. But for Israel's detractors, he is a liability for Israel. So Israel's economy is not going to be able to really pick up as long as he's prime minister. Israel's society is not going to heal as long as he's prime minister. The war is not going to end as long as he's prime minister. His fanatical fascist coalition is going to continue to be genocidal and fanatic, and that's certainly going to be to the detriment of stability and security for Israel. So really, all in all, he just bodes bad for Israel at this point in time, because he's now hostage to his criminal past.
Marwan, many thanks for that. Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.